Hello there, my very good friends. On today's wrestling news, I'm going to tell you all about WWE's potential plans for Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 37.
T-Bar blasts wrestling personalities for disrespecting Brodie Lee.
AEW looks set to move Dynamite away from Jacksonville in February.
And New Japan are apparently getting their very own English language TV deal. I'm Adam Wilbourn.
And I'm Andy Murray.
And this is the news.
Feels good to be back, doesn't it? Feels real good to be back after a nice breakaway. Let's start things off by talking about this WrestleMania 37 story then. Roman Reigns, the big dog, the tribal chief, the head of the table, the man of many nicknames, the Universal Champion. Who the hell is he going to defend that wonderful belt against on the biggest wrestling show of the year? Well, we know he's got to get through Kevin Owens once more. That feud is continuing. Some excellent matches from those two so far. I'm sure the next one will be a ripper as well. But you know, WrestleMania 37's looming. We've had the Rock rumour dismissed several times, unfortunately, as much as a lot of us would love to see that match. But we've got a new report here from Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer saying that WWE may have two options in mind at the moment. And I get the impression that you guys are going to like one of them a lot more than another one. Let's start on the positive. New year, start on a positive. Daniel Bryan, that's the first name here, and this would make a lot of sense given the current booking patterns. Bryan recently defeated Jey Uso on SmackDown. He was beaten to a pulp by Uso on a previous episode in October, writing him off TV, so they've already got the established beef there. Bryan really wouldn't even need to win the Royal Rumble. You could justifiably put that together straight away because they already have issues. That would make a whole lot of sense, and it would probably, definitely be a better match than the second option, which is Goldberg. He has obviously been needling Reigns a lot recently, talking about him on the bump. He called him a joke or something back in August. They were supposed to face at WrestleMania 36. That didn't happen. Goldberg ended up losing to Braun Strowman instead, dropping the Universal title. But those are your two options there. Meltzer writes about it a little bit, and his commentary's spot on. You know, Bryan's a better match, but for outside interest, 54-year-old Goldberg is probably the bigger name in that regard, which is kind of an indictment of the current situation. For me, personally, Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns is a match I've been looking forward to for a long, long time. We obviously had it like 4 or 5 years ago after Roman's first Royal Rumble win. But Goldberg, it becomes an increasingly harder sell as the months pass by, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to reflect your views and probably the majority of our audience's views in this, which is, obviously, generally I would prefer it to be Daniel Bryan. That would be a spectacular match, and also one that they can, you know, as WWE like to do, include a lot of sort of self-referential stuff about who's actually the guy and who they wanted to be the guy, and you know, their sort of shared history together and what have you from way back in like 2015. But there is a part of me that's okay with Goldberg being in the title match at WrestleMania. It's just he needs to be destroyed in 2 minutes by the tribal chief. And I don't think that's probably what you want to happen at WrestleMania. It was shocking enough when it happened to Cena at SummerSlam after all. Yeah. I realise that you and I have kind of been out of the loop of wrestling for the last 2 weeks, Andy. We took a little bit of a break from it all, and in that time period, I believe Big E has become Intercontinental Champion. Why isn't he in this conversation? Because he is the perfect man to win the Royal Rumble, isn't he?
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, it certainly felt like at the start of this single push that would have been a very natural route for them to head down, but perhaps they want to do a slower build with Big E. Maybe they want to have him hold the Intercontinental title for a while and then maybe enter the world title picture later in the year, maybe around SummerSlam or something like that. I would love to see Big E win the Royal Rumble. I think him and Roman would be a tremendous pro wrestling match, but at the same time, you know, Daniel Bryan has said recently that maybe he doesn't have the longest time left as a full-time wrestling performer. Maybe he's looking at becoming a part-timer and looking after his family and stuff. If we're going to do him and Reigns, maybe it has to be sooner rather than later. So, you know, if we lose something like Big E versus Roman, I'm happy that we're getting Bryan instead. Goldberg, you know, I'm a big defender of Goldberg on this channel. I'm on the record as doing that several times. But that's not a particularly enticing match unless they're able to do the Brock Lesnar match between him and Goldberg from a few years ago, which was bloody great and only 4.5 minutes. Perfect.
please don't get injured, Daniel Bryan, is what we're basically saying there. Just keep our options open. Let's move on and talk about the whole Brodie Lee situation. Actually, the first time Andy and I have sat down and spoken about this. Awful news, obviously, about Brodie Lee's passing, breaking over the Christmas break. And yet, here we are reporting on a story about people inexplicably disrespecting Brodie Lee, John Huber, or the Huber family, I suppose. And T-Bar, to his credit, has come out and spoken about this. He has tweeted off the back of what I'll get into in a second, saying, if you are a wrestling personality and you decide to have a hot take that disrespects the Huber family, do me a favour, take your conspiracy theory and go F yourself with it. This is in response to Bill Mitchell, formerly of Pro Wrestling Torch, who led this whole weird wave of speculation about Brodie Lee, or John Huber's passing, and was followed up by former mid-carder from WCW Disco Inferno doing the same thing on Conan's Keeping It 100 podcast, speculating about his passing that we don't need to speculate about, basically. There was also that fake Brodie Lee Jr. Twitter account that someone inexplicably thought it was a good idea to make. Thankfully, that has all been shut down. But yeah, I mean, obviously this is awful news to report on anyway, Andy, and yet this somehow makes it even worse.
Yeah, it's kind of mental, isn't it, that even in the middle of this horrible situation, this horrible tragedy where a beloved 41-year-old man with a wife and 2 children has passed away, that wrestling personalities, some of them have still found a way to be awful. And awful is exactly what it is. We're not going to give this too much airtime. We don't want to dignify the comments that were made, but good on T-Bar here for speaking out. He's dead on. He's dead right. This whack job conspiracy theory, misinformation nonsense plagues everything in modern society. It extends to situations like this, which are genuinely tragic and horrible and awful. It's a real shame. It's really terrible. And yeah, man, let people grieve. Let people grieve. Don't go prodding.
I think the thing is here is a lot of times when awful things happen, you want there to be some sort of conspiracy or some sort of theory behind it to sort of, make sense of it in your own mind. But sometimes tragic things are just that, tragic. Yeah. Just accept it, and unfortunately, let's move on.
Yeah, 100%. Let's stick with AEW a little bit here. It's possible that the promotion might be moving away from Daly's Place. That's the Jacksonville, Florida amphitheater from which they've producing most of their shows throughout the pandemic. They had a brief sojourn at QT Marshall's gym in Georgia, but for the most part, they have been stuck in the Jacksonville building, and that's not too bad because it's a lovely building. But we got the report here from Cassidy Haynes of bodyslam.net talking about how AEW could be heading to Miami, just down the coast. Southern Florida, maybe a little bit warmer for their tapings throughout February. That would be for Dynamite, Dark, and of course the Revolution pay-per-view, though the promotion would look to return to Daly's Place in March. Now, there's no word on specifically what venue AEW will go for if they do go to Miami, although Haynes does note that a number of complaints have been made about Daly's Place, which is an outdoor amphitheater, and wrestlers have to work in the cold. We've heard about this numerous times, about how chilly it is in that building when they're doing the tapings and stuff. There's also the belief within AEW that a change of scenery could just be good for morale for a month or so. So it looks like they're moving away from Daly's Place. It's been a really cool looking building. The presentation in the empty arena era, they've done everything they can with it. It looks pretty nice on TV. They've obviously had fans back in small numbers. But I'm always in favour of a little change of scenery every now and then, freshen the visual style of things up. And if these wrestlers are cold as hell wrestling these matches, then maybe it does make sense to go indoor further down the state where you imagine it's maybe a little bit warmer.
Yes, I have just been singing Will Smith's Miami in my head for the last 2 minutes whilst Andy reported on that story. But as you say, Andy, I think for the health and well-being of the wrestlers, and like you say, just to change things up a bit, I'd be completely down for that. Obviously, we're all just sat here waiting, hoping for, the vaccine and stuff to eventually allow us to all return, but that is still a few months off yet. So, yeah, I'd be completely fine with this, to be perfectly honest. What do you reckon, Andy?
Yeah, why not? Let's go for it. Boom.
Right, let's move on and talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer reporting they are currently negotiating a new English language TV deal. Meltzer saying it is very close. First time they could have an English language TV deal since back in 2019, which now technically, I suppose it's 2 years ago, sort of. God, that's weird. Anyway, they'd, of course, previously broadcast on Access TV in the US, starting back in 2014, but, with Josh Barnett and Jim Ross and Mauro Ranallo before he went to WWE, doing stuff on there. But when Anthem, Sports and Entertainment, purchased Access TV and Impact and all that stuff started happening, New Japan went off, etc. We need this, don't we, Andy? And especially, I suppose right now with Wrestle Kingdom going on.
Yeah, for sure. It was a pretty important tool, Access TV for New Japan, as far as their United States expansion goes. That has slowed somewhat in recent years, particularly this year. They haven't been able to come over and tour because of what's going on around the world, but they still have these strong show filmed in California and put out on New Japan World. Full English commentary on most New Japan World events, but that's not quite the same as having your own TV deal where you can reach, tens of thousands, hopefully hundreds of thousands more people. It's positive news. It's a good move. I'm looking forward to finding out what network any potential New Japan show is going to be on. Makes it more accessible, opens the door for new fans. It's a good thing all around.
Exactly. And speaking of New Japan, actually, that allows us to transition over to today's Twitter questions at WhatCultureWWE. Of course, if you want to get in touch with us. First question today comes from Mad Pancakes on Twitter. He says, "Morning, lads. Would you like to see a huge New Japan invasion on AEW? It would be a huge moment and could have feuds like Bullet Club versus Elite, Okada versus Omega, and the Golden Lovers reunion. Just imagine the dream matches like Will Ospreay versus Pac. Thoughts?"
Yeah, I'd really like to see some kind of collaboration between the two companies, whether that's just a series of interpromotional matches, whether it's a full-on invasion, whether it's a one-off show, whatever it is. I think that the possibilities for exciting matchups is very, very high. You've got all kinds of great wrestlers on the AEW roster who don't have extensive interactions with your Okadas and your Ishiis and your Suzukis and stuff. Guys like Pac, who you've just mentioned there, he was in Dragon Gate for a long, long time across multiple periods, but, minimal stuff in New Japan. So, yes, I would like to see it a lot. I think that we could get some really great matches out of that, and I think it would benefit both parties as well.
Absolutely, and I think, the matches that have been suggested there, for some reason my brain has gone, let's see Kazuchika Okada versus Pac, and now I can't unsee that match, which would be fantastic. And I certainly think with AEW and Impact Wrestling sort of dipping their toes in this sort of idea towards the end of last year, and obviously as we head into 2021, I think it's definitely feasible, and clearly companies can work together. Let's hope we can see more of that this year. Mark Solid gives us our second question of the year, saying, "Morning, guys. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too, Mark. Thoughts on having a tag team Money in the Bank match? I'd say put it on NXT along with the women's tag titles. Who would you like to see in it and win it?" says Mark.
It's an interesting idea, and I think in a bubble, it's probably quite a cool idea, quite a unique idea. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But the thing for me personally is that last year, WWE they love ladder matches at the moment. Last year, and we've said this on the news before, 10% of all ladder matches in WWE history went down last year. That is a ridiculous, crazy number. For me, they've kind of burned them out. It feels like we do one every other week. They're now using them as things like qualifiers for other matches, It's a crazy situation. I think they've burned the ladder stipulation, even with Money in the Bank out, just a little bit. So I personally would like to see them dial back before they introduce more. Maybe stick to Money in the Bank, what you currently have, and maybe one other ladder match a year. You don't need like 12 or 20 or however many they had last year. So I'm not 100% opposed to this idea, but not quite now. I think we need to dial back before we dial in.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. If I had to do it and put it on a team in NXT, unquestionably the team that are just sneaky little bastards that could sneak in and steal those tag team titles. As much as I love Ever Rising, they would be really good, actually. Grizzled Young Veterans. I hope this is the year for Grizzled Young Veterans in NXT, because my love for James Drake and Zach Gibson, so hopefully for that. And in terms of Money in the Bank, just generally, I sort of stumbled across this in my drunken stupor watching TLC at the end of last year. To save Money in the Bank, give the briefcase to Adam Cole. It's really that simple, isn't it? Because it's been a bit of a bust last year, let's be honest. Final question today comes from Chris, who says, thoughts on WWE/AEW's New Year's resolutions? It's time for WWE to start acting like they have main events planned every week. Completely agree with that, Chris. Announce a main event and make it a big deal if you have to bump it for a bit bigger match suddenly mid-show. Yeah, what do you reckon? WWE, AEW resolutions for this year, Andy?
AEW, I would like to see them fully resist the urge to make Sting the AEW World Champion.
Yes.
I understand he's one of the biggest names in, wrestling history, at least over the past couple of decades, the past 3 or 4 decades. But come on, that would kind of go against everything that the company has made itself to be so far. For WWE, man, it's tough for WWE because there are so many different things you could point at and go, ooh, I'm not too keen on this, I'm not too keen on that, let's do more of this. For me, I think I would like to see them build up more of a... So the women's division in WWE is obviously a lot stronger than it is in AEW, but when you look beneath the top level, when you look beneath the Sasha Banks and the Charlottes and the Askas and stuff, there's not always a whole lot going on. I would like to see them develop more of a competitive framework beneath them, elevating mid-carders, pushing multiple people at once. I'd like to see this from AEW as well, of course, but I think it would be a good thing for WWE to focus on in 2021 as well.
Well, I love this question, by the way, and I'm probably going to steal it for a series of podcasts, What Culture Wrestling, wherever you get your podcasts from, with the Dudley boys over the next few days. In my opinion, kind of simple for AEW, fix the women's division, give it long-term booking. And in WWE, we could sit here for ages, and we will when I sit down with the Dudley boys to discuss this sort of thing. WWVD, what would Vince do? If Vince would do it, don't do it. There you go. Let's move on to today's and finally, and everyone's going back to work this week and you need a bit of cheering up. Just head to bootydaddy.com. That is Scott Steiner's website from the 90s. Thank you to Troy Converse on Reddit Squared Circle for sharing this, saying the year is 2021 and bootydaddy.com, Scott Steiner's website from the 90s, is still up. Go and check it out. It's like the best GeoCities page ever. Audio just plays left, right, and centre. I'm fairly certain there's some flaming text in there. Andy, this has brightened up my first Monday back at work. Yeah,
likewise, man. Likewise. It's a flaming, rotating skull gif and a MIDI file away from 90s GeoCities perfection.
it's just, I want to know who sat there and went, how can I make a Scott Steiner South Park figure? There we go. That's what everyone needs. Let us know your thoughts on that and all today's news stories in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts. God damn, it feels good to say that again. You let us know your thoughts and Twitter questions on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Watch there, follow both of us. You can follow Andy Murray at
Andy H. Murray. The H today, it can't really stand for anything else. Huber John, rest in peace.
Absolutely. Follow me on Twitter at Adam Wilbourn. Follow us all at What Culture WWE. But for now, my thanks to Andy Murray. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.